Hey everyone, I was just talking to MyChana Burton. She's written a book and she's also a coach helping people with trauma. We were having a lot, great conversation, but I felt like I needed to record this instead of just talking one-to-one because there were a lot of questions I wanted to get into because they're people I've met personally and professionally, whatever, that probably could use some of the information. Maybe they know people information. But anyway, MyChana has written a book, Shame of Me, which is about dealing with her own, trauma. And it's a number one best-selling book. You can go look it up. I'll put the links and everything once I post the video and all. When you're seeing the video, you'll get all the information. I'll get it from MyChana and I'll post it here. But what she also does is helps others who are dealing with that, go through that process. So MyChana, kind of, I guess, give your history. What do you do? Obviously, everything from your W-2 to, actually what do you also do in coaching? Yeah.
So I've been in coaching in different capacities for probably the last 20 years. Coaching in the agile space is my kind of what I've been doing kind of on a W-2 basis as far as my job. Agile coaching, Scrum Master, those type of project coaching. But I wrote my book, Shame Off Me, Confronting Your Childhood Trauma to Heal Your Mind, Body, and Spirit. And it's my journey to healing after being a survivor of childhood trauma. So I actually work with high-performing women who are very highly educated and generally in a very sometimes often C-level or professional lawyers, doctors, those type of where it's high demand, high energy, high expectations of the things that they do. So they're used to giving that. But if they look at their relationships, their relationships lack in a way that are generally signs that there is trauma that has not yet been dealt with. So I have a coaching program called Unapologetically Me that allows us to be able to look at ourselves and embrace who we are and the survivors of the trauma that we are to continue to be the well-educated, highly intelligent, professional women that we are, to be able to continue to be successful, to not only see success in our professional careers, but also to finally see success in our love life, in our relationships across the board, relationships with our children, our family, our coworkers, but ultimately be able to have that relationship that they desire from a romantic standpoint.
Awesome. Let's go back to your process, right? How you wrote the book and how did you discover that? Was that through some kind of therapy or was it more self-reflection? How did you essentially figure that you were going through this trauma, and was it always in the memory, or you just kind of forgot it and then it kind of, surfaced in your later years? And then if you want to share what was the trauma, it's up to you, but kind of if you want to walk through the process and sharing how you discovered and how you were able to resolve it.
Yeah, I'm a survivor of childhood sexual trauma. So I went through about 8 years of childhood sexual trauma with multiple people, both men and women. So I actually, through relationships with both men and women, found that there was a common thread or a common theme in my relationships. And in going through that, the memories were always there. However, it wasn't until I turned 30 that I actually was able to kind of see where I was and not be necessarily happy with where I was in my relationships.
Mm.
Even though if I looked at it, I'm like, oh, I always had a strong relationship with my family, but that was because I lived under a veil of silence. So there were things that I didn't say, and that I lived under that. I'm fine. I made it through it. I survived it. Then, I'm good. I had been through years of therapy, but in that therapy, I didn't feel comfortable being honest about what was happening or what had happened, because as a minor, my therapist would have been required to report if I actually disclosed who the people were. So didn't feel comfortable like exploding my family like that. And so I've always been that compliant, good, I do what is expected of me type of people pleaser, which is a trauma response. But I had always been that people pleaser. And in being that people pleaser, I just could not share that information, no matter how much my therapist or anyone asked me, because I just couldn't. I couldn't blow up my family like that, because it was family that I had been abused by. So, but at 30, I started doing a lot of self-reflection of where am I and what is it that I really want, and how I had to be unapologetically MyChana and be able to look at myself in the mirror and be happy with me in my life and stop living my life as other people dictated or expected. A lot of
Good. So, well, I mean, okay, so that's great. And then that's when you kind of delved into yours, and when did this whole writing a book thought come to you? And why? What was that journey like? Like, what is the reason? There must have been some push, like you wanted to share this with. So probably I mean, from, I'm just going by our conversation before recording it. Basically, you had a thought process of helping others. That's
right.
like the reason.
So
kind of explain that.
So in the process of studying for my doctorate and doing the research on trauma as my focus, I found that there was so much information that would have been so helpful to me, for me to know before I started my journey, and the importance of how the trauma actually leaves a mark and leaves breadcrumbs, and essentially how being in a relationship with someone who has had trauma is like walking through a minefield, that at any point everything could blow up on something being triggered that the person may not even be fully aware of the trigger. And being able to be able to identify those triggers, and in identifying those triggers, be able to say, what is it about this situation that is causing me anxiety, or that's causing me to instantly get angry? Because I noticed that there were smells that instantly caused a reaction, that when I actually took the time to actually go back and reflect on that, and I call it doing kind of like open and just kind of free journaling, just writing everything that comes to my mind, and then going back and reading it and kind of filling in the spaces with the things that I knew. That those were sometimes how some of those memories that I had repressed actually came back to me, because something was triggered. I smell a certain type of cologne, or a sound that was happening during the abuse, that actually caused me to, I would just hear it. You could hear it randomly, and I would instantly get angry, or instantly feel fear, or feel like I needed to retreat into my own shell. So there were so many of those things that I had to take note of, and then over time, I was able to fill in those spaces of what I didn't know or what I didn't remember. But it was a lot of therapy and even going through my own coaching to understand me and to be able to then want to freely help others who have experienced some of the same things. Just in the process of writing the book, having many conversations with women who remember that, like the slam of a screen door would always remind them of their dad coming home like angry. So it wasn't just sexual trauma, but it was like, emotional or verbal or could be physical abuse that actually happened that would actually be triggered by a sound or someone, knocking on the door a certain way or someone raising their voice in a certain tone that they would actually remember memories of their childhood that they hadn't maybe thought about in decades.
That's a great point. Even going back to my own stuff I've dealt with, there are certain triggers I've had, right? Been dealing with my own things with my, my childhood, mostly the parents and surroundings that, those triggers in any other relationship, that type of conversation or that type of tone, boom, triggers. And then boom, you're fired off and there's no, it's like a complete attack mode. And, I've seen that with others, in my own life, friends, close relationship, different people having, now that I know that, right? Before I didn't know that,
Right.
you're talking about, now you're aware, you automatically obviously know that now, and you can detect it in other people. And it was very, it took me a while to understand that. And like I was sharing with you, just some examples in my own personal life I come across even recently where I automatically detect trauma now. When I see people getting triggered like easily, then I know it's some trauma they don't want to deal with. They're just resisting, and they haven't, like you explained, kind of haven't figured that out. So with that, let's jump into that, right? How do you, you're not coaching people, like you said, high level, performers, especially women, dealing with that. How do you get into that? Like, somebody, obviously they detected something, so they come to you for coaching. So kind of, I guess, maybe an example or two without mentioning names, I guess, maybe kind of walk through the process. How do you help them? Kind of like, I'm just curious too, but for others to listen to, so maybe they can come to you and say, hey, look, I got something. Can you help me?
So it's, okay, so I do every day throughout coaching, I do a journal prompt. So where I send them a journal prompt that asks either a question or asks them to think about a time when it may be a journal prompt that says, okay, I want you to think about a time when you felt unsafe, and then ask them to journal about that. And then there's a follow-up question of what was the thing that actually changed how you felt from feeling unsafe to, or what is it that you did that allowed you to move from feeling unsafe to feeling safe? And what that actually helped people to do was to actually identify what their coping mechanisms were, whether they're healthy coping mechanisms or unhealthy coping mechanisms. Sometimes it could be talking it through. Sometimes it could be, I would have a quart of ice cream, or I would actually smoke a cigarette or have several drinks and go to sleep. That would actually help me go to sleep. So it would actually be able to identify what are your healthy and unhealthy coping mechanisms that you actually are your go-to thing when you feel unsafe or when you feel scared or when you feel anxiety. And then so I do a lot of do a lot of journaling, and some people don't like to write. So I actually allow them, give them different options. So there's different ways of journaling. People do video journals, voice journals. Some people like to write. I'm a writer. So, but it's a way of getting them to a point where they let it out and release it, because some of that holding it in is what actually continues to force them to react. But sometimes letting it out and then getting to a point of understanding that they are safe and being able to communicate with their inner child, as far as that inner little girl, that what is it that she needed from you, or what is it that you needed your parents to give that little girl? Because then it becomes a process of parenting that little girl, because that's the person within us that's scared, that person who experienced it all, the younger version of ourselves, and being able to parent that younger version of ourselves into a place of safety for them to be able to allow that inner younger person to heal, so that them as an adult can then thrive and not constantly be going back to the triggers that they would receive from the things that happened to them as a young child.
Awesome. Great. So let's get into some of the signs that, people who haven't figured it out, maybe perhaps, like some of the things that people should watch out for. It could be women. I mean, this could be even men, right?
It could be men.
It applies to everybody. Right?
Yes.
So yeah, everybody. So some of the triggers, right? Like we kind of talked about it a little bit, but again, I guess I will share some of the things I've seen about myself and others. Is if you're consistently getting into certain relationship or friendship with certain type of people, then you figure out, oh no, this is not the person I should be ever talking to. That's one of the triggers I've noticed about myself. I notice faster now, like something is wrong with me. Essentially, what am I? What's not wrong with me in the sense that there's like I'm something wrong. No, it's something in my mindset or what I'm not dealing with that I'm choosing that, right? And the same thing with the relationship. If you're not in a consistent relationship or having issues in relationship, there's always, I figured out now that it's something mostly to do with me, not the other person. If I don't resolve that within me, then it doesn't matter what the other person is, because I'm going to choose the wrong person constantly. We kind of talked about it, but kind of you tell how you coach through that, because you figured that out yourself about yourself. So
I did.
Share that?
I had to look at myself and look at the common denominator of myself in the relationships, and be able to look at what is it about this person that is drawing me or to them or them to me. So what is it that I am giving off or putting out in the relationship that they're attracted to, but I see that I can see now that it's an unhealthy attraction that is there. So either my desire to take care of people or my desire to please people, because people pleasing is a trauma response, and or being able to just take stock of and honestly identify what it is that I want in a relationship. And if you can identify what it is that you want in a relationship and not focus so much on what you don't want in a relationship, it allows you to attract those things to you. Because when you are focused on what you don't want in a relationship, then that's what you're attracting toward yourself, because you're focused on the don't want. Yeah. If you focus on this is what I want in a relationship, then you will find that you start seeing it. You will start seeing it. It's kind of like you go buy a car and you're like, you see the car everywhere, or you're interested in a car and then you start seeing the car everywhere. It's because desire for it has made you acutely aware of it. So if your desire for specific things that would be good for you in a relationship, then you'll start seeing those things in the people around you, so you can actually attract that more.
That's a great point. Like, in the brain science, it's called the reticular activating system, where when you're looking for something, it'll show up, right? So that's a great point you shared. So awesome. So getting into the, through that part, right? Like, how do you coach through that? How do you, like, because somebody comes to you, she's like, hey, I'm ending up with all these wrong people, right? Kind of, how do you coach through that? Like, how do you tell, like, hey, look at this, look at that, whatever that is, right? How do you coach them through that?
I'm a big proponent of SWOT analysis. So in relationships, for both myself, having someone do, their strengths, their weaknesses, their opportunities and threats. And if you can actually do a SWOT analysis of you in relationships and how, okay, I'm really strong at communication, but I'm weak at people pleasing because I want everybody to be happy, even if it doesn't make me happy, which can also be a threat to your own happiness. But if you can actually look at, okay, what is it that what did you love about this relationship? And then what is it that you didn't like? What is it that you disliked about the relationship? And if you can focus on finding the things that you loved about each of the individual person, then you'll be able to find those things that you're looking for in a relationship. So if you can look at, okay, what was good about the relationship? And if then it's okay, what is it that you felt you got out of the relationship? Because if you can focus on what you felt you were receiving from the relationship, then you can actually I can be able to coach to what was missing, like what may need to be parented in the inner child, that to be able to address those things. How can we address it? How can we actually parent our inner child for those things that we felt we were missing, but we felt that maybe this person allowed us to have that particular trait of feeling needed or wanted, or being able to be helpful towards someone. And the need to, because in what I found in my own childhood is that I had a need to be the great student, the good daughter, the one that was always the favorite, because I was dependable. And so those were things that I needed. I needed to feel that I was not causing trouble, that I was seen as the good daughter. I was seen as the student that was always giving 110% and helping my classmates. And so those were things that I could feel like needed or wanted and in those situations. So being able to see those things and being able to then coach and parent that inner child from that perspective helps to kind of heal those portions, so you can actually then really focus on, okay, what is it that you need what is it you need out of a relationship, so you can begin to attract what you truly need for you to have a fulfilling relationship.
Awesome. That's that's a lot of stuff there. So okay, before we go into my final wrap-up questions, the last question I have before that is, what are some of the things you recommend for people dealing with trauma that they self-realize, maybe whatever reason they're reluctant to get coaching, whatever, right? What are some of the things you prescribe? Maybe they can read your book and, get some steps to heal themselves. What are the things you would suggest to people listening if they're going through that, what are the top 2 or 3 things, I guess, they should do?
Definitely have a person. Have a person that will walk out the journey with you, even if you don't want to do coaching or therapy, but have a person that when you're feeling a certain way that you can call and they will allow you and they will be encouraging to you, but also hold you accountable to not staying there. So, I mean, I had put, for example, I have a friend who, when if I get overly emotional, she puts me on a time limit. She'll literally say, "You have 2 minutes." And then we're moving on from here. And having a friend or someone that will hold you accountable to that will allow you to cry, whatever it is, that emotions that you're feeling at that point, but will say, okay, now we're moving on. Now what? Now what do we need to do to move on from here is really important. Now, a coach does that and is going to force you to take a look at what you need to do to move forward, and really going to force you to make the decisions on what you're going to do to move forward and set those goals properly. But even just having a person that is willing to be basically your ride or die through it as you go through those really tough times. Now, in my book, there are exercises and there's things that you can do and there's questions that are going to get you to thinking about where you are in that particular situation. There's also the ACEs quiz, the Adverse Childhood Experiences quiz, that'll actually show you kind of all the different types of adverse traumas, adverse childhood experiences that you can go through. And generally, if you say you score more than 4, then generally that would say that you have adverse childhood experiences that are still, if you haven't gone through therapy or gone through a process of actually dealing with them, processing them, healing from them, that you are still carrying the weight of it, which also, can cause health problems, mental issues, all these things that because that trauma lives. And actually, in my book, I talk about it, it gets under your skin, meaning that trauma that hasn't been dealt with, especially when it's severe, repeated trauma can actually change your DNA. So it can actually change how your DNA, which means you're actually, when it changes your own DNA, it allows you to then pass it on to your children because your DNA that you're passing on changes. So it is something that can actually be passed on. So it is really important that you make sure that you deal with it to not cause those type of traumas to be passed on from generation to generation as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's a great point, like epigenetics, where your genetics are evolving. And that's a great point about dealing with that. I just wanted to also add that, MyChana is talking about maybe the big trauma, but there's small trauma. There's a lot of stuff people don't deal with, personally, just by myself, just talking about myself. It's not major, but small that affects relationships, friendships, everything. So it's very important. People, when you're consistently having issues, certain things that are triggering you, I would say, maybe it's not all the things, MyChana wrote in her book, but there might be things that can help you and truly look at it and understand it, look inwards and then work on it. And then, like she said, that affects maybe your future generations. That's a great point you made. Awesome, MyChana. That's a great point. We'll end it with that part. And now I'll last, 2 or 3 questions. We'll see. One question, the first one of the last three I usually ask is, what's the best book you read that you recommend to others? Not your book. We'll put your book down, but we're talking other books you read personally that helped you, that can help others.
My goodness, there's so many.
I know.
Yeah. And I wish I would have like grabbed a copy of my book, because I have a whole list of books in a whole book list
Right.
of books that I recommend. But one of the ones that I guess there is a book. Oh my God, I'm having brain farts.
That's okay. I didn't prep you for that
That's
one.
the name of the books, and because there's so many, and I usually mix them all up. And I don't think I have a book like I do. I
Perfect.
do. So let me just grab it. And actually, I don't know if this one actually has it in the back. It does not. Okay. I will, can I actually send that with the links, and I will give
Yeah, no,
you,
that's fine. If you can mention
because I'm
it,
like,
great. Yeah,
yeah.
no,
So
well,
there's all kinds of different books. Like Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad Poor Dad was like a mindset. It was one of those mindset books that changes. Who Moved My Cheese is another one of those mindsets, that books that just like are so simple in their concepts, but they change how you see the world. So those are two of my favorites.
awesome. No, that's a great, those are great mentions.
They're
Yeah.
two of my favorites that really were about a mindset shift. And often that's really what it's about. It's about you actually being committed to shifting your mind in the way you see the world, from the limited perspective that you also can see it from through your trauma. When you're looking at it from the lens of your trauma, your mindset can be very limited and narrow.
Yeah. Yep, that's a great point. Okay, the second to last question is, I mean, based on a conversation, I kind of probably know, but kind of share what inspires you to do what you do every day.
Being able to see generations healed from the trauma. So just being able to see a woman that is going to, finds the love of their life after having many broken relationships. Being able to find my own love, that is me knowing that the difference from before and after was me finding my true love has been that thing that has changed everything. And I want to see that is being able to have deeper, stronger relationships with the people around you, because you have made a choice to make yourself a priority in your healing.
That's great. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, kind of figured. I mean, you went even further than what I thought you would say, but okay, last one. Last but not the least, what's the one tip that has helped you? I mean, obviously, seems like you've read a lot of books. I'm sure you have a lot of tips dealing with coaching and all the stuff you're doing. But what's the one tip, top tip you have that has helped you, that can help others?
Give yourself grace. Being able to see yourself healed and giving yourself grace as you go through the process. That is the biggest thing that I can actually offer, is that it's being able to be gracious to yourself.
That's a great tip, because one of my favorite sayings is Wayne Dyer saying this: when you don't have love here, you can't give love out there. So right. If you don't love yourself, care yourself, you're not going to be able to care or love anybody else. And that's exactly what you said. I mean, awesome. Great tip. And thanks, MyChana, for taking the time. I know I threw it on you like, hey, we were talking in between. I'm like, hey, let's record.
Let's do it.
And you have, viewers you are seeing on the video, her, kind of internet is a little bit choppy. So excuse that, but the content, the information is awesome. So, recommend highly listening to this if you can't, see it. But I will be posting all the links, our book information, and any websites or anything with the videos I post. So if you can reach out to MyChana for coaching, or maybe just having a conversation. I don't know, maybe a consultation perhaps, right? So anyway, I reach out to her. And again, thanks you, MyChana, for taking the time.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.